CEO Millionaire hadn't danced in 20 years until he heard the song of the new secretary. She didn't notice the security cameras focusing on her, didn't see the employees whispering behind glass doors, didn't realize that 47 floors above, a billionaire was gripping his desk so hard his knuckles had turned white. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt like you didn't belong? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The billionaire who banned music from his empire heard a melody that stopped his heart. The same song his wife hummed before she died in his arms 20 years ago. But the woman singing, it was a stranger who claimed it was written for her by a father she barely knew. What he discovered about that song would change everything he believed about his marriage, his wife's death, and the blood running through his own veins. Have you ever heard a song that transported you back to the worst day of your life? Have you ever wondered if the person you loved most was keeping secrets that could destroy you? This is the story of a man who built walls so high, he forgot what he was hiding from. Stay with me, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about love, loss, and the music that connects souls across generations. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. He built a billion-dollar empire on silence, until the day a stranger's humming shattered 20 years of carefully constructed peace. The 47th floor of the Wexler Tower cut through Chicago's skyline like a blade of steel and glass, its corridors so quiet you could hear ambition echo off marble walls. Clayton Wexler preferred it that way. No music, no laughter, no sounds that might trigger memories he'd spent 2 decades burying. At 57, Clayton had perfected the art of emotional numbness. His morning routine never varied. Black coffee at 5:47 a.m., Wall Street Journal by 6:15, first meeting at 7:30 sharp. His employees knew the rules. No humming, no whistling, no phones with ringtones that resembled actual melodies. Violators were terminated immediately. The no-music policy extended to every property he owned. Restaurants, hotels, office buildings, all operated in blessed silence. His lawyers had written it into every lease, every contract, every agreement. Music was forbidden in the Wexler Empire, because music reminded him of her. 20 years ago, Layla had swayed in his arms to an old blues tune in a New Orleans jazz club. Her dark hair cascaded over bare shoulders as she hummed along, her body warm against his chest. Then she gasped. Her eyes rolled back. She collapsed, and the music died with her. Heart failure, the doctors said. Sudden and catastrophic. Nothing anyone could have done. Clayton never danced again, never listened to another song, never hummed another tune. He built his fortune on the ashes of melody, creating an empire where silence reigned supreme. His assistant knocked softly. Mr. Wexler? The temp agency sent someone for the secretary position. I didn't approve any temporary staff, Clayton replied without looking up from his contracts. I know, sir, but she's already here, and there seems to be some confusion with the paperwork. Clayton's jaw tightened. Confusion meant chaos. Chaos meant disruption. Disruption meant the elevator dinged softly on the 32nd floor, and that's when he heard it. A low, haunting hum drifted through the air vents. The melody froze him mid-step because it was impossible. That song died with her. Have you ever built walls so high around your heart that you forgot what you were protecting? Tell me in the comments about a memory you've tried to bury. She wasn't supposed to be there. No interview, no background check. Just a woman with sad eyes and a voice that carried ghosts. She moved through the glass-walled office like poetry in motion, her worn dress a splash of deep blue against chrome and leather. Humming without realizing the chaos, she was creating 47 floors above. The other employees stared as she settled at the temporary desk, her fingers dancing across the keyboard with surprising grace. Zara Beauregard had never seen an office like this. Everything gleamed. Everything cost more than her monthly rent. The silence felt heavy, oppressive, like a church during funeral services. So she did what she always did when nervous. She hummed the song her grandmother taught her, the one her father used to play on his old saxophone. She didn't notice the security cameras focusing on her, didn't see the employees whispering behind glass doors, Didn't realize that 47 floors above, a billionaire was gripping his desk so hard his knuckles had turned white. The temp agency had made a mistake, sending her here without proper clearance. She'd only taken the job because her grandmother needed medicine, and temporary work paid better than her usual cleaning jobs. The address seemed wrong when she arrived, too fancy, too intimidating, but the security guard had waved her through. Now she sat in the most beautiful office she'd ever seen, surrounded by people in suits that cost more than her car, trying not to feel completely out of place. The humming helped. It always did. The melody was simple, melancholy, the kind of tune that made you think about lost love and second chances. Her father had written it, her grandmother claimed, inspired by a woman who got away. Marcus Beauregard died before Zara turned 15, leaving behind nothing but stories in this one haunting song. She glanced up to see a man approaching her desk. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. His face was carved from stone, all sharp angles and controlled fury. "You," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "What is that song?" Zara blinked. "Excuse me? The song you're humming. What is it?" Heat crept up her neck. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was humming." "I'll stop. Answer my question." His eyes were ice blue, boring at her like he could read her thoughts. "Where did you learn that melody?" "My father wrote it," she said quietly. "My grandmother used to sing it when I was little. It's just an old family tune." Something shifted in his expression. Pain, maybe, or recognition. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne, close enough to see the way his hands trembled. "Your father's name?" he demanded. "Marcus Beauregard. But he died years ago." "Why does it?" When he finally found the courage to approach her desk, she looked up with eyes the color of storm clouds and said, "Mr. Wexler, I've been waiting for you." The words hit him like lightning, because they were the exact words Layla had spoken the night they met. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt like you didn't belong? Share your experience below. 20 years of silence crumbled in 30 seconds, all because a stranger knew a song that should have died with his wife. The empty office after hours felt like a cathedral of secrets, city lights painting golden patterns across Zara's face as she spoke about a father who played saxophone on street corners and dreamed in melodies. Clayton had dismissed his staff early, claiming urgent business that required privacy. But the truth was simpler and more terrifying. He needed answers, and he couldn't risk anyone overhearing what those answers might reveal. "Tell me about the song again," Clayton said, his voice carefully controlled. He'd loosened his tie, rolled up his sleeves, abandoned the corporate armor that usually protected him from emotional chaos. Zara shifted in her chair, still uncomfortable in the opulent surroundings. "There's not much to tell. My father wrote it for some woman he loved before I was born. My grandmother said it came to him in a dream." "What woman?" "I don't know. He never talked about her. Just said she was someone special who got away." Zara's voice softened. "My grandmother used to tease him about it. Said he wrote that song for a ghost." Clayton's chest tightened. "When did he write it?" "Early 80s, I think. Maybe 84 or 85. Why are you asking me all this?" She leaned forward, studying his face. "You look like you've seen a ghost yourself." If only she knew. Clayton had spent 20 years convinced that Layla was his alone, that their love story was unique and sacred. But now this stranger sat in his office, humming the melody that had been playing when his wife died, claiming her father wrote it for some mysterious woman who disappeared. "Your father," Clayton said carefully. "Did he ever mention New Orleans?" Zara's eyes widened. "How did you guess?" "He lived there before Hurricane Katrina. Lost everything in the storm and came to Atlanta to start over. That's where I was born." She paused. "Mr. Wexler, you're scaring me. What's this about?" Clayton stood and walked to his window, staring out at the Chicago skyline. The lights blurred together as his mind raced through possibilities he didn't want to consider. Coincidences this massive didn't exist. Not in his world. "The night my wife died," he said quietly, "she was humming that song." Silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither wanted to voice. Zara's breathing had quickened, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. That's impossible, she whispered. Is it? Clayton turned to face her. Your father lived in New Orleans. My wife died in New Orleans. Your father wrote a song for a woman who got away. My wife knew that song. He stepped closer. Tell me that's all coincidence. Zara stood abruptly, backing toward the door. I should go. This is crazy. You're talking like... Like what? Like your father might have known my wife. Clayton's voice rose. Like the song you've been humming your whole life might be connected to the woman I loved more than life itself. Her hand was on the door handle when he spoke the words that stopped her cold. What was your father's name again? She turned slowly. Marcus Beauregard. He died in 2005, right after Hurricane Katrina. What? Clayton felt the room tilt. Marcus was the name Layla whispered in her sleep. What family story or song connects you to someone you've lost? Music has power. Tell me about yours. Some names should stay buried, but when the past refuses to rest, it rises like flood water, drowning everything in its path. The detective's office reeked of coffee and broken promises, file cabinets stuffed with other people's secrets while rain drummed against windows that hadn't been cleaned since the Clinton administration. Clayton sat across from Jim Morrison, no relation to the singer. The man always clarified, watching him flip through a thin folder that contained what little information existed about Marcus Beauregard. Street musician, Morrison said, stubbing out his third cigarette. Played saxophone outside jazz clubs in the French Quarter. No steady address, no bank accounts, no credit cards. The kind of guy who lived off tips and disappeared into the crowd. What about before Katrina? That's where it gets interesting. Morrison leaned back in his creaky chair. Beauregard had a regular spot outside the Bourbon Street Blues Lounge. Same corner, same time, every Friday and Saturday night for almost 15 years. Then the storm hit, and he vanished. Clayton's pulse quickened. The Bourbon Street Blues Lounge. The same club where he'd taken Layla for their anniversary dinner. The same place she'd collapsed while they danced. I need everything you can find, Clayton said. Photos, witnesses, anyone who might have known him. That's a tall order. Most of the old-timers died in Katrina or scattered afterward. But I've got a contact in the quarter who might remember. Give me a week. Back at the office, Zara was waiting. She'd stayed late again, claiming she needed to catch up on filing. But Clayton suspected she was as desperate for answers as he was. The tension between them had shifted after their confrontation, becoming something electric and dangerous. Any luck with your investigation? She asked, not looking up from her computer screen. Some. Your father was well known in the quarter before the storm. Her fingers stilled on the keyboard. I've been thinking about what you said, about coincidences. And maybe they're not coincidences. She finally looked at him, her storm cloud eyes reflecting the city lights outside. Maybe some things are meant to be discovered. Clayton moved closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe my father and your wife. She stood, facing him across the small space between her desk and his office door. Maybe their story isn't finished. The air between them crackled with possibility and danger. Clayton reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek. She didn't pull away. This is complicated, he said softly. The best things usually are. Before either could think better of it, she rose on her toes and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, then deeper as he pulled her against him. She tasted like hope and secrets, her body warm and real in his arms. When it broke apart, both were breathing hard. I should go, she whispered, but made no move to leave. Stay. The word escaped before he could stop it. Just stay with me tonight. The first batch of photos arrived by courier at midnight. Marcus Beauregard playing saxophone outside the Bourbon Street Blues Lounge. The date stamp made Clayton's hands shake. September 15th, 2005. The same night, Layla collapsed. In the background, barely visible, a woman in a red dress watched from shadows. A woman who looked exactly like his dead wife. Have you ever discovered something about someone you loved that made you question everything? How did you handle it? The dead don't lie, but the living do, and sometimes the truth is more dangerous than the grave. The photograph lay spread across his mahogany desk like evidence of a crime. magnifying glass revealing details that shouldn't exist, his wife's profile caught in streetlight, watching a man she claimed never to have met. Clayton had been staring at it for 3 hours, searching for any other explanation, any detail that might prove his eyes were lying. But there was no mistaking Layla's face, her posture, the way she held her head when something captured her complete attention. She was watching Marcus Beauregard play, and her expression wasn't that of a casual passerby hearing street music. It was the look of someone seeing a ghost. Zara arrived at 7 a.m., earlier than usual, her hair still damp from a rush shower. She'd spent the night in her own apartment, but the kiss they'd shared had changed something fundamental between them. The air hummed with unresolved tension and unanswered questions. "You've been here all night," she said, noticing his rumpled clothes and stubbled jaw. "Couldn't sleep." He handed her the photograph. "Look at this." She studied it carefully, her face growing pale. "That's definitely my father. But the woman." She looked up at him with wide eyes. "She looks like me. She looks like my wife." The words hung between them like an accusation. Zara set the photo down with trembling fingers. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I am stating facts." Clayton's voice was tight, with barely controlled emotion. "Your father knew my wife. This photo proves it. It proves they were in the same place at the same time. That's not the same thing, isn't it?" He moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. "She knew that song, Zara. She hummed it the night she died. And now you're here, humming the same melody, claiming your father wrote it for some woman who got away." Zara backed against the wall, her breathing quick and shallow. "You think I'm lying? I think someone is." The accusation stung more than it should have. She'd grown up with whispered rumors about her father, that he drank too much, that he chased married women, that he left broken hearts in every city where he played. But she'd never believed those stories. Marcus Beauregard had been her hero, the father who taught her to find music in everyday sounds, who told her she was special long before the world proved him wrong. "My father wasn't a homewrecker," she said fiercely. "He was a good man who played beautiful music and tried to make people happy. And my wife wasn't a liar. But one of us is wrong." They stared at each other across the charged space, two people bound together by a mystery neither wanted to solve. The kiss from a night before felt like it had happened to different people, before the photograph changed everything. Clayton's phone buzzed. A text from a detective. "Found something big. Meet me at Café du Monde in New Orleans. Tomorrow. Come alone." But he wouldn't be going alone. Not anymore. Zara grabbed the photo with shaking hands, studying her father's face in the image. "That woman in the red dress," she whispered. "She looks like you," Clayton finished. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither wanted to voice. When someone you care about lies to you, what hurts more, the lie or the fact that they didn't trust you with the truth? Share your thoughts. DNA doesn't lie, but it doesn't tell the whole truth either. Sometimes the most important connections aren't written in blood. The genetic testing lab gleamed with clinical precision, but nothing could sanitize the emotional chaos of two people about to discover if fate or coincidence brought them together. Clayton had insisted they get tested before flying to New Orleans, claiming he needed facts before chasing ghosts. But deep down, he was terrified of what those facts might reveal. "This feels wrong," Zara said, staring at the cotton swab in her hand. "Like we're crossing a line we can't uncross. We crossed that line the moment you walked into my office, humming her song." Clayton had already provided his sample, a simple cheek swab that might rewrite everything he thought he knew about his marriage. The technician, a young woman with kind eyes and steady hands, explained the process with clinical detachment. "Results will be available in 3 to 5 business days. We'll test for familial relationships, genetic markers, anything that might indicate shared ancestry." Shared ancestry. The words made Zara's stomach clench. She'd grown up believing she was alone in the world except for her grandmother. The possibility of family, even complicated, impossible family, felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. "What if we're related?" she asked Clayton as they walked to his car. "What if my father and your wife were?" "Were what? Siblings? Cousins? Lovers?" Clayton's voice was harsh, but she could hear the fear underneath. What if none of this is coincidence? They drove in silence through downtown Chicago, both lost in thoughts too dangerous to voice. The kiss they'd shared felt like a lifetime ago, back when their only connection was mysterious and beautiful instead of potentially scandalous. That evening, Clayton ordered Thai food to his penthouse, claiming they needed to discuss their New Orleans trip. But when Zara arrived, still wearing her simple blue dress from work, he forgot all about logistics and strategy. She looked lost in his marble and glass world, like a wildflower in a museum. "You don't have to do this," she said, gesturing at the expensive takeout containers. "I know this whole situation is crazy." Crazy doesn't begin to cover it. He handed her a glass of wine, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The touch sent electricity up his arm. "But I can't stop thinking about that photograph, about the way she was looking at him. What if they were in love?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made both of them uncomfortable. If Marcus and Layla had been lovers, if they'd shared something Clayton never knew about, then what did that make him and Zara? "Then I lived 20 years loving a woman who belonged to someone else," Clayton said quietly. Zara set down her wine and moved closer. "Or maybe she loved you both. Maybe some people are big enough to hold more than one heart." Before he could respond, she kissed him. This time, there was no hesitation, no gentle exploration. This was hunger and desperation, the kiss of two people who might be about to lose each other to a truth they couldn't control. He pulled her against him, his hands tangling in her dark hair, and she melted into his touch like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. They moved together toward his bedroom, shedding clothes and inhibitions with equal abandon. She undressed him like unwrapping something sacred, each touch asking permission, each kiss a question he answered with sighs. "Is this okay?" She whispered against his skin. "Yes," he breathed, surprised by how much he meant it. They made love with the desperation of people who might discover tomorrow that their connection was forbidden. Every touch felt stolen, every caress a small rebellion against fate. Afterward, as they lay tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets, Zara traced circles on his chest with her fingertip. "Whatever the test results say," she whispered, "this was real. What we just shared, it was real." Clayton pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair. What if real isn't enough? As she drifted to sleep in his arms, 3 words formed in her mind that terrified her more than anything she'd ever faced. By morning, she was gone, leaving nothing but the indent of her head on his pillow and a note that said, "Some things are too important to risk on a maybe." What does it mean when someone treats your vulnerability as strength? When they see your surrender as courage? Tell me below if you felt that rare connection. Coincidences are just miracles where God forgot to sign his name, but some signs are too clear to ignore. Her apartment felt smaller now, the walls closer, the ceiling lower. The space hadn't changed, but she had, and now her carefully constructed world couldn't contain what she'd become. Zara sat on her grandmother's old couch, staring at her phone, fighting the urge to call Clayton and explain why she'd run. Because how do you explain terror? How do you tell someone that you fell so hard, so fast, that it felt like dying and being reborn in the same breath? The DNA results would arrive today. 3 days of waiting, 3 days of avoiding his calls, 3 days of wondering if she'd thrown away the best thing that ever happened to her because she was too scared to take the risk. Her grandmother shuffled from the kitchen, carrying 2 cups of sweet tea like she had every afternoon for the past 20 years. At 83, Viola Beauregard moved slowly but with purpose, her dark eyes still sharp enough to see straight through her granddaughter's defenses. "You gonna tell me what's got you looking like somebody stole your favorite song?" Viola settled beside her, the couch creaking under their combined weight. "It's complicated, Grandmama." "Love usually is." Zara looked up sharply. "Who said anything about love?" Viola chuckled, the sound rich and knowing. "Child, I raised you. I know that look. Same look your daddy used to get when he talked about that woman in his song. Tell me about her again." "The woman Daddy wrote the song for." Viola's expression grew thoughtful. Your daddy was playing outside that blues club in New Orleans. Must have been 84 or 85. This woman came out during his break, said she'd been listening from inside and loved the way he played. They talked for hours that night. What was her name? Layla something. Pretty thing, mixed like you, with eyes that looked like they held secrets. Viola paused. She was married, though. Wedding ring big as a marble. Your daddy knew it was wrong, but sometimes the heart don't care about right and wrong. Zara's teacup slipped from her numb fingers, crashing against the hardwood floor. Layla, you know that name? Before Zara could answer, her phone rang. Clayton's name flashed on the screen, and her heart hammered against her ribs. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something in his voice when she finally answered made her blood run cold. The results are in, he said without preamble. We need to talk. Clayton, not over the phone. Meet me at Grant Park. The fountain. 1 hour. The line went dead, leaving Zara staring at her phone like it might explode. Her grandmother was watching her with those sharp eyes, putting pieces together faster than Zara could process them. This man you're running from, Viola said quietly. His wife was named Layla, wasn't she? Zara nodded, unable to speak. And you think she might be the same woman your daddy loved? Another nod. Viola reached over and took her granddaughter's hands. Baby girl, some stories are bigger than the people living them. Sometimes we're just instruments in a song that started playing long before we were born. An hour later, Zara stood by the Grant Park fountain, watching Clayton approach with an envelope in his hand. His face was unreadable, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself like a man bracing for impact. The DNA results, he said, holding out the envelope. I'm scared to know. So am I. He sat beside her on the fountain's edge, the envelope between them like a loaded gun. But we can't build anything real on secrets and maybes. Zara took the envelope with trembling fingers and tore it open. The laboratory letterhead swam before her eyes as she tried to focus on the words that would either free them or destroy them forever. Genetic analysis indicates no familial relationship between subjects. Probability of shared ancestry, less than 0.01%. Subjects are not related by blood. The relief was so overwhelming that Zara started to cry. Happy tears, grateful tears, tears of a woman who just discovered she could love without guilt or shame. Clayton pulled her into his arms, his own eyes suspiciously bright. We're not related, he whispered against her hair. Whatever connection exists between Marcus and Layla, it doesn't make us family. But it doesn't explain the song, Zara said, pulling back to look at him. It doesn't explain how she knew it. No, it doesn't. But maybe some mysteries don't need solving. Maybe some things are meant to stay beautiful and unexplained. He kissed her then, soft and reverent, like a man who'd just been given permission to love without conditions. And for the first time in 3 days, Zara felt like she could breathe again. But as they held each other by the fountain, neither noticed the man with the camera across the street, documenting their reunion for reasons that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with revenge. When was the last time you were completely honest with someone about your fears? About what you really wanted? Share your experience below. The woman he married and the woman he loved were the same person, separated by death, connected by blood, and bound by a song that survived them both. The genetic counselor's office felt like a courtroom where DNA played judge and jury, delivering verdicts that rewrote family trees and shattered carefully constructed truths. Clayton sat across from Dr. Patricia Chun, a woman whose steady voice had just turned his world upside down with 6 simple words. There's something else in the results. Zara gripped his hand tighter, her palm damp with nervous sweat. They'd come here expecting confirmation of what they already knew, that they weren't related, that their love was legitimate. But Dr. Chin's expression suggested complications they hadn't anticipated. The DNA analysis revealed something unexpected. Dr. Chun continued, consulting her computer screen. We found genetic markers that indicate Ms. Beauregard shares a familial connection with another sample in our database. What kind of connection? Clayton asked, though part of him already knew the answer would change everything again. A half-sister relationship. Same father, different mothers. Dr. Chun turned her screen so they could see the genetic comparison chart. The match came up automatically when we ran Ms. Beauregard's sample against our existing database. Zara's voice was barely a whisper. Whose sample? The sample belonged to Layla Wexler. It was submitted for testing 21 years ago as part of a medical workup. Dr. Chin paused. Ms. Beauregard, your half-sister died in 2005. The silence that followed was deafening. Clayton felt the world tilt sideways as puzzle pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Layla and Zara were sisters. Marcus Beauregard was Layla's father, too. The song wasn't about a lost lover. It was about a lost daughter. That's impossible, Zara said, standing so abruptly her chair toppled backward. My father never mentioned having other children. Never said anything about abandoning a daughter in New Orleans. Clayton's voice was hollow. About walking away from a little girl who grew up wondering why her daddy never came home. The pieces kept falling into place. Layla's mysterious trips to New Orleans. Her obsession with jazz music. The way she'd grown quiet whenever he asked about her childhood. She hadn't been having an affair with Marcus Beauregard. She'd been searching for the father who abandoned her. She was looking for him, Clayton said, more to himself than anyone else. That night she died, she wasn't just visiting New Orleans for our anniversary. She was trying to find her father. Zara sank back in her chair, her face pale as moonlight. And he was there, playing on that street corner like he did every weekend, not knowing his daughter was watching from the shadows. The heart attack, Clayton continued, the horrible truth emerging like a tumor. It wasn't random. It was the shock of seeing him, of being so close to the father she'd spent her life wondering about. Dr. Chun cleared her throat gently. Emotional trauma can absolutely trigger cardiac events, especially in individuals with undiagnosed heart conditions. They drove back to Clayton's penthouse in stunned silence, both processing the enormity of what they'd learned. Zara stared out the window at Lake Michigan, watching sailboats drift across water that looked like hammered steel. She was my sister, she said finally. All this time, I had a sister, and I never knew. She never knew either, Clayton replied. But she spent her adult life looking for family, looking for connections she felt but couldn't name. In his apartment, surrounded by luxury that Layla had helped create, they held each other like survivors of a shipwreck. The revelation had changed their dynamic fundamentally. They weren't just two people who'd found each other. They were the living continuation of a love story that had been interrupted by death. What does this make us? Zara asked, her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. It makes us the answer to a question she never got to ask, Clayton said, stroking her hair. She was looking for family, for connection, for the missing pieces of herself. And she found you instead. No, he corrected softly. She found me first. But maybe she was preparing the way for us to find each other. They made love that night with a new understanding of their connection. It wasn't just passion or coincidence that had brought them together. It was the invisible thread that connects all human hearts, the mysterious force that ensures love finds a way to complete itself across generations. As Zara fell asleep in his arms, Clayton thought about the photograph of Layla watching Marcus play. She hadn't been looking at a lover or a stranger. She'd been looking at the father she'd never known, gathering courage to approach him, to finally ask the questions that had haunted her whole life. But courage had come too late. Her heart had stopped before she could take that final step across the street, before she could tap Marcus on the shoulder and say, "Excuse me, but I think you might be my daddy." Now Clayton held her sister in his arms, the woman who carried Marcus's other half, the woman who might help him understand what Layla had been searching for all along. How would you react if you discovered the love of your life was connected to you in ways you never imagined? Is it destiny or disaster? She didn't go to New Orleans for their anniversary. She went to find a family she thought was lost forever. Bourbon Street pulsed with life and music, every note a ghost of what was lost, every melody a bridge between past and present, while they walked the same path Layla had taken 20 years before. The humid air carried sounds that made Clayton's chest tighten. Saxophone wails from darkened doorways, piano blues spilling from jazz clubs, the rhythm and pulse of a city that never forgot how to mourn and celebrate in the same breath. They'd flown down that morning, driven by a need to understand Layla's final days, to walk in her footsteps and maybe find the peace that had eluded her. Clayton had booked them into the same hotel where he and Layla had stayed for their anniversary, though being there with Zara felt like stepping into an alternate timeline where love got a second chance. She walked down this street, Zara said, studying the photograph they brought along, looking for a father she'd never met, carrying 20 years of questions. The Bourbon Street Blues Lounge still existed, though under different ownership. The new manager, a thin man named Eddie with kind eyes and permanent smile lines, remembered the old days when Marcus Beauregard played the corner outside. Marcus was a regular. Eddie told him over coffee in the empty club, Friday and Saturday nights, rain or shine. Good musician, troubled soul. Always looked like he was waiting for someone who never came. Did he ever mention having children? Clayton asked. Family he'd left behind? Eddie nodded slowly. Used to talk about his babies when he'd had too much to drink. Said he had daughters somewhere, girls he couldn't find. Broke his heart, you could tell. Daughters. Plural. Marcus had known about both Layla and Zara, had carried the weight of abandoning them both. What happened the night of September 15th, 2005? Zara asked, her voice steady despite the pain Clayton could see in her eyes. That was the night everything changed, Eddie said. Marcus was playing, same as always, when this woman came out of the club. Beautiful thing, all dressed up like she was going somewhere special. She stood across the street for the longest time, just watching him play. Did she approach him? She was working up the courage, I think. I saw her start across the street a couple times, then change her mind and go back. Like she wanted to, but couldn't make herself take that final step. Eddie's expression grew sad, and she just collapsed, right there on the sidewalk. By the time the paramedics arrived, she was gone. Clayton closed his eyes, seeing it all too clearly. Layla in her red dress, the one she'd worn for their anniversary dinner, standing in the shadows watching the father she'd never known, building up courage that would never be enough. What did Marcus do? Zara asked. That's the strangest part, Eddie continued. He didn't know who she was, but when he heard the paramedic say her name, he went white as a sheet, dropped his saxophone right there on the sidewalk and ran. Never saw him again after that night, because he'd realized, in that horrible moment, Marcus had understood that the beautiful woman who'd been watching him, the woman who died before she could cross the street, was the daughter he'd abandoned decades ago. That evening, in their hotel room overlooking the French Quarter, Clayton and Zara held each other while the city's music drifted through open windows. They'd made love earlier with desperate passion, clinging to each other as if they could somehow heal the wounds that had brought them together. She died not knowing, Zara whispered against his chest. She died with all those questions still trapped inside her. But we know now, Clayton replied, his hand stroking her bare shoulder. We can carry her questions and our answers. We can be the family she was looking for. Is that what we are? Family. Clayton tilted her chin up so he could look into her eyes. We're whatever we choose to be. Lovers, partners, family, all of it or none of it. But whatever we are, we're connected by something bigger than coincidence. They made love like the world was ending and beginning simultaneously, her body moving against his with desperate grace, while jazz music drifted through hotel windows, sanctifying their union with the same rhythms that brought them together. Every touch felt sacred, every kiss a promise that this story would have a different ending than the one that brought them here. Afterward, as they lay tangled in sheets that smelled like magnolia and possibilities, Zara traced the outline of his face in the darkness. I love you, she said, the words simple but weighted with everything they discovered about themselves and each other. I love you too, he replied, and meant it in ways that had nothing to do with Layla's memory and everything to do with the woman in his arms. But even in the midst of their happiness, neither could shake the feeling that their story was still missing pieces. Important pieces that would change everything once again. Sometimes we have to travel to strange places to understand the people we thought we knew. Have you ever discovered someone's secret motivation after it was too late? The dead speak through letters left behind, and sometimes their words change everything about the way we remember them. The hotel manager handed them a folder with shaking hands. Mrs. Wexler left this 20 years ago, said if anyone ever came looking for Marcus Beauregard or his daughter, I should give it to them. Inside was a letter addressed to Zara in Layla's handwriting. The letter trembled in Zara's hands like a living thing, each word a revelation that rewrote the story of her lonely childhood and Clayton's grieving widowhood. They sat on the hotel bed, morning light streaming through windows that overlooked the street where both their worlds had changed forever. My dearest sister, if someone is reading this to you, it means I didn't survive long enough to find you myself. It means the courage I've been building for 20 years wasn't enough to cross that street and tap our father on the shoulder. Yes, I know about Marcus. I know he's your father too. I've been searching for both of you my whole adult life. Zara's breath caught. Clayton reached for her hand, anchoring her to the present as Layla's voice spoke from beyond the grave. I was 5 when he left, old enough to remember his saxophone, the way he used to play lullabies that made Mama cry. She never told me why he walked away, just said some people aren't built for staying. I married Clayton when I was 26, a good man who loves me despite the holes in my heart where family should be. But every anniversary, every birthday, every holiday, I felt the emptiness of not knowing where I came from. I hired detectives. I searched records. I followed rumors and dead ends until I finally found him here in New Orleans, playing the same corner where he used to play when I was little. And I found out about you. Zara Beauregard, my baby sister, born 3 years after he left us, raised by his mother in Atlanta. I have pictures of you from the private investigator, graduation photos, work records, little glimpses of the life you built without knowing you had family who was looking for you. Clayton watched Zara's face as she read, seeing years of loneliness and wondering dissolve into understanding. She wasn't alone, had never been alone. Layla had been searching, caring, loving her from a distance. I've been planning this trip for months, working up the courage to approach him, to find out if he knows where you are. Part of me is terrified he won't remember me. Part of me is terrified he will. But I have to try. I have to know. And if I find him, if he tells me where you are, I'm going to find you too. We're going to be sisters finally. We're going to fill in all the empty spaces that have been aching our whole lives. Clayton doesn't know about any of this. He thinks this trip is just another anniversary celebration. But it's so much more than that. It's me finally taking control of my own story, finally refusing to let the past keep me from the family I was born to have. If something happens to me before I can find you, I need you to know you were loved before you were found. You were wanted by someone who understood what it felt like to grow up with half a heart. The letter continued for 3 more pages, detailing Layla's search, her discoveries about their father's life after he left, her dreams of what their relationship might become. She'd researched Zara's life extensively, knew about her struggles, her jobs, her grandmother's illness. I've set up a trust fund in your name. Clayton's lawyers have the details. It's not charity. It's family taking care of family. It's making sure you never have to choose between dignity and survival again. And if something happens to me, if I don't make it back to tell Clayton about you myself, please find him. Tell him our marriage was real, our love was true, but it was also preparation. I think I was meant to love him so he would be ready to love you. Because here's what I believe, little sister, love doesn't end with death. It just finds new ways to grow. The song our father wrote wasn't about losing someone. It was about finding them again in unexpected ways. You carry half his music, half his heart. I carry the other half. Together, we make him complete. Together, we make each other whole. The final paragraph made both Clayton and Zara cry. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home to tell Clayton about you myself. But if my baby sister Zara is alive, if she's reading these words, then my heart can finally rest. The song Marcus wrote wasn't just about losing me. It was about finding her. Take care of each other. Love each other. Be the family I dreamed we could be. All my love. Your big sister, Layla. They held each other in the silence that followed, both understanding finally that their love story wasn't separate from Layla's. It was the continuation of it. She hadn't just been Clayton's wife. She'd been preparing the way for this moment, this connection, this healing. She knew, Zara whispered. Somehow, she knew we'd find each other. She believed in love that transcends time. Clayton said, his voice rough with emotion. She believed some connections are too strong for death to break. When someone you lost could write you one final letter, what would you want it to say? What would you tell them in return? Some houses hold more than memories. They hold the missing pieces of who we're meant to become. The lawyer's office hadn't changed in 20 years, still smelling of leather and old money, where documents waited like time capsules containing dreams that death had interrupted. Harold Blackstone adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and spread papers across his mahogany desk, while Clayton and Zara sat in chairs that had witnessed decades of family secrets being revealed. Your sister was very specific about her instructions, Blackstone said, his voice carrying the weight of legal authority. The trust was established in 2003, 2 years before her death. She updated it regularly, adding funds every quarter. Zara stared at the documents that proved Layla had been planning for their reunion long before that fatal trip to New Orleans. Bank statements showed systematic deposits, careful investments, a growing nest egg meant to ensure her sister would never face the kind of poverty that forced impossible choices. How much? Zara asked, though the number felt less important than the intention behind it. $2.7 million, Blackstone replied, plus the property. What property? Blackstone slid a deed across the desk. A house in Buckhead. She bought it 5 years ago, said it was meant to be a place where sisters could build new memories together. The address was familiar. Zara had driven past that house 100 times on her way to cleaning jobs in the wealthy neighborhood, never imagining that the beautiful Victorian with a wraparound porch belonged to family she didn't know existed. There's more, Blackstone continued. Medical trust for your grandmother's care. Educational fund if you want to go back to school. And specific instructions about Mr. Wexler. Clayton looked up sharply. What instructions? She wanted him to be the trustee, to help you navigate this new life. To be, Blackstone consulted his notes. To be the family you both deserve. They drove to the house in silence, both processing the magnitude of Layla's planning. She hadn't just been searching for family. She'd been building a foundation for their future together. The house sat on a tree-lined street, like something from a magazine, all gingerbread trim and stained glass windows, with a garden that looked like it was waiting for someone to come home. Inside, the rooms were furnished but unlived in, like a stage set waiting for actors to bring it to life. But on the kitchen counter, they found another envelope marked for when you're ready to be home. Inside were floor plans with notes in Layla's handwriting. Music room for family gatherings. Office space for Clayton when he visits. Guest rooms for the children I hope you'll have someday. She planned our whole life together, Zara said, her voice breaking. She believed in us before we even met. Clayton pulled her into his arms in the empty living room where afternoon light painted patterns on hardwood floors. She believed in love, in family, in the idea that some connections are too strong to break. They made love in a house that was meant to be their beginning, on the soft rug in front of the fireplace while dust motes danced in golden light. She pulled him into the empty space that was now hers, their bodies colliding with hope instead of desperation this time. She wanted us to find each other, Zara whispered as he lifted her onto the kitchen counter that had been waiting 20 years for this moment of joy. She wanted us to be happy. Then let's not waste the gift she gave us, he replied, his hands reverent on her skin, his touch promising forever instead of just tonight. But happiness makes enemies, and someone had been watching their investigation from the beginning. As they lay together afterward, the phone rang with a call that would shatter their newfound peace. Clayton Wexler? The voice was cold, professional, threatening. Stop digging into the past, or both of you will join Layla sooner than planned. Have you ever inherited something that was more valuable than money? What legacy would you want to leave behind? The past has claws, and some people will kill to keep their secrets buried beneath 20 years of lies. The parking garage echoed with footsteps that didn't belong to them, shadows moving with purpose while they ran toward a car that might not start fast enough to save their lives. Someone had been following them since they left the lawyer's office, someone who didn't want Layla's secrets coming to light. "This way," Clayton whispered, pulling Zara behind a concrete pillar as voices echoed through the underground space. Male voices, discussing them like they were problems to be solved rather than people with lives worth protecting. "The detective was right," one voice said. "They know too much. Boss wants this cleaned up before they can cause more damage." Clayton felt Zara's hand tighten in his. Detective Morrison had been found dead in his office 3 days ago, an apparent heart attack that now seemed less natural and more convenient. Someone with power and resources was willing to kill to keep the past buried. They'd returned to Chicago that morning, flying commercial because Clayton's private jet had been sabotaged. Sugar in the fuel tank, the mechanic explained, enough to bring down a plane if they hadn't caught it during pre-flight inspection. Coincidences were piling up like evidence in a murder trial. "Who will want to hurt us?" Zara had asked during the flight, her voice small and scared. "Someone who profited from Layla's death," Clayton replied, pieces of a larger puzzle starting to form in his mind. Someone who had something to lose if she found her family. Now, crouched in a parking garage while strangers discussed their murder, the theoretical became terrifyingly real. Clayton's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your wife didn't die of natural causes. Meet me at Navy Pier, midnight, if you want proof." They made it to his car, tires squealing as they escaped the parking garage, but safety felt temporary. Back at his penthouse, with security guards posted and alarms activated, they tried to make sense of the threats. What if Layla's death wasn't natural? Zara asked, pacing the living room like a caged animal. What if someone killed her to stop her from finding her family? Who would benefit from that? The answer came in the form of corporate documents Clayton had never bothered to examine closely. Layla's will, her life insurance, her shares in his company, all of it had reverted to him when she died. But if she'd found family, if she'd changed her beneficiaries, millions of dollars would have gone elsewhere. Richard Halverson, Clayton said, the name bitter on his tongue. His business partner, his supposed friend, the man who'd helped him build his empire while he grieved. He was the executor of Layla's estate. He had access to everything. They met their mysterious contact at Navy Pier despite the danger, driven by a need for truth that outweighed their fear. The man turned out to be Dr. Samuel Reed, the emergency room physician who'd treated Layla the night she died. "I've been carrying this guilt for 20 years, Dr. Reed said, his hands shaking as he pulled out a manila folder. Your wife didn't die of natural heart failure. She was poisoned. The toxicology report had been altered, he explained. The original showed traces of digitalis, a heart medication that could trigger fatal arrhythmia in someone with no history of heart disease. Someone had paid to have the results changed, the evidence buried, the case closed without investigation. Who? Clayton's voice was deadly quiet. I don't know. The order came from high up, with threats about my medical license if I didn't comply. But I kept copies of everything, insurance against whoever was powerful enough to cover up murder. The drive back to Clayton's penthouse was tense, both of them processing the reality that Layla had been murdered to prevent her from reuniting with her sister. The car behind them had been following for miles, and Clayton's training from his military days kicked in as he took evasive action through downtown Chicago's maze of streets. They burst through his apartment door, adrenaline and fear making them desperate for each other's touch. They made love with the urgency of people who might not survive the night. Every kiss a promise, every caress a claim on whatever future they might have together. I can't lose you, she whispered against his throat as they moved together with desperate passion. Not when I've just found you. You won't, he promised, though they both knew some promises were too big for any one person to keep. The detective who'd been helping them lay bleeding on his office floor when they arrived the next morning, his final words a warning that chilled their blood. It wasn't her heart that killed her. Check the autopsy. Check who signed it. Check who paid for the cover-up. Before he died, he pressed a key into Clayton's hand, evidence that someone had murdered Layla to keep her from finding her family. When someone threatens what you love most, how far would you go to protect it? What lines would you cross? 20 years later, murder will out. Especially when love refuses to let the dead rest quietly. The corporate boardroom became a courtroom as police surrounded the table where million-dollar deals were made. But tonight, justice was the only currency that mattered. Richard Halverson sat at the head of the conference table, his silver hair perfect, his suit expensive, his smile confident, even with handcuffs around his wrists. "You have no proof," he said calmly, though sweat beaded on his forehead. "Accusations from a dead detective and a bitter widower don't constitute evidence." Detective Sarah Williams spread photographs across the polished table. Bank records, travel receipts, phone logs that painted a picture of guilt 20 years in the making. Halverson had been in New Orleans the night Layla died, had hired the man who slipped digitalis into her drink at the jazz club, had paid for the cover-up that kept the truth buried. "Your business partner trusted you," Detective Williams said. "His wife trusted you. But you saw an opportunity when she started looking for family members who might inherit her shares. The motive was financial, but the method was personal." Halverson had been embezzling from Clayton's companies for years, using his position as CFO to siphon money into offshore accounts. Layla's death meant her shares reverted to Clayton, who was too grief-stricken to pay attention to the books. But if she'd lived, if she'd found Zara and changed her will, an audit would have exposed the theft. "Layla discovered the missing money," Clayton said, understanding flooding through him. "That's why she was really going to New Orleans. Not just to find Marcus and Zara, but to confront you about the theft. She had copies of financial records," Detective Williams confirmed, "hidden in her hotel safe. Records that showed systematic embezzlement dating back 5 years. Halverson's composure finally cracked. She was going to ruin everything. 20 years of partnership, of friendship, and she was going to destroy it all over some numbers on a spreadsheet. "So you had her killed. I had it stopped. The death was supposed to look natural. Heart failure runs in families. We checked. But she had to go and complicate things by collapsing in public instead of quietly in her hotel room. The confession was recorded, witnessed, undeniable. 20 years of guilt and careful planning crumbling in the face of evidence and determination. Halverson had killed Layla to protect his theft, then spent 2 decades covering his tracks while playing the role of supportive friend to her grieving husband. "You comforted me at her funeral," Clayton said, his voice deadly quiet. "You helped me plan her memorial service. You were there when I couldn't sleep, when I couldn't eat, when I thought grief might kill me too. I was protecting both of us. The money was already spent. Killing her was just cleaning up a problem that couldn't be solved any other way." They arrested him there in the boardroom, where he'd stolen millions while pretending to mourn a woman he'd murdered. Clayton watched his former friend led away in handcuffs, feeling something close to relief for the first time in 20 years. Justice for Layla. Finally, that night, he and Zara celebrated in the house that was meant to be their beginning, making love with the passion of people who'd survived a war and emerged victorious. She moved beneath him with joy instead of desperation, her body welcoming his with the openness of someone who no longer feared tomorrow. "We did it," she whispered against his throat as they collapsed together, spent and happy. "We found the truth." "No," he corrected, pulling back to look into her storm cloud eyes. "We found each other. The truth was just what we needed to be free." But freedom came with responsibilities, and as they held each other in the aftermath of lovemaking, Zara knew she had something important to tell him, something that would change their future in ways they were only beginning to imagine. Sometimes justice takes decades, but truth always finds a way. Have you ever fought for something that seemed impossible? Share your story. The song that brought them together would welcome new life, proof that love doesn't end with death, it multiplies across generations. The nursery overlooked Grant Park, windows open to let in the sounds of children playing. Music that Clayton finally welcomed instead of feared. They'd been living in Layla's house for 6 months, making it their own while honoring the dreams she'd built into every room. The music room hosted weekly gatherings where Zara played piano and Clayton attempted guitar, their imperfect harmonies filling spaces that had waited decades for the sound of family. "I have something to tell you," Zara said, her hand resting on her stomach in a gesture that made Clayton's heart skip beats. He was painting the walls of what they'd planned as an office, but the soft yellow color suggested other possibilities. Possibilities that made him smile before she even spoke the words. "We're going to have a baby." The paintbrush fell from his fingers, leaving a golden streak across hardwood floors. 26 years of marriage to Layla had never produced children. Doctors had blamed stress, timing, age. But now, at 57, with a woman half his age who carried his heart along with his child, Clayton felt like the luckiest man alive. "When?" he asked, crossing the room to pull her into his arms. 7 months. The doctor thinks it happened in New Orleans that first night when we... She blushed, remembering their desperate lovemaking in a hotel room where they'd first read Layla's letter. "She knew," Clayton said, his hands moving to cover hers where they rested on her still flat belly. Somehow, Layla knew this was going to happen. The nursery plans, the trust fund, all of it. They'd found Layla sketches for the house renovations, complete with detailed notes about child-proofing and safety measures. She'd planned for grandchildren she'd never meet, for the continuation of a family line she'd worked her entire adult life to reconstruct. The pregnancy was easy, blessed, like their love had been from the beginning. Zara bloomed with new life, while Clayton discovered the joy of anticipating fatherhood. They took childbirth classes together, painted cribs, and filled the house with the sound of hope instead of grief. "What should we name her?" Zara asked during one of their evening walks through the neighborhood, where she'd never imagined she'd belong. "Her." Doctor confirmed it yesterday. "We're having a daughter." Clayton stopped walking, overwhelmed by the symmetry of it all. A daughter who would carry forward the love that had connected 3 generations, the music that had survived loss and found expression in new life. "Layla," he said simply. "We'll name her Layla." But Zara shook her head. "She deserves her own name, her own song." "What about Melody?" "For the music that brought us together." They compromised on Melody Layla Wexler, honoring both the past and the future. When she was born on a snowy February morning, with lungs strong enough to wake the entire maternity ward, Clayton held his daughter and felt his world complete itself in ways he'd never imagined possible. "She's beautiful," Zara whispered from the hospital bed, exhausted but glowing with the satisfaction of bringing perfect life into the world. Melody had her mother's storm cloud eyes and her father's stubborn chin. But when she settled into Clayton's arms, she stopped crying and listened with the focused attention of someone born to appreciate music. Outside the hospital window, snow fell like benediction, while 3 generations of love looked toward a future full of lullabies and possibility. Months later, when she was ready, they made love like it was the first time and forever simultaneously, her body that had given him a daughter now giving him herself again, completely and without reservation. The physical connection that had started with mystery and grown through revelation now deepened into something approaching worship. "I love you," she whispered as they moved together in the rhythm that had become their private music. "I love this life we've built." "I love you too," he replied, his hands mapping the body that had changed to accommodate their miracle, his touch reverent with gratitude for everything she'd given him. As he held his daughter while she slept, humming the melody that brought her mother into his life, Clayton understood that some songs are too powerful to die. They just wait for the right voices to sing them home. What moment made you believe in fresh starts and second chances? The man who banned music from his empire now danced with his daughter to the song that gave him back his life. The Wexler Tower's 47th floor now echoed with laughter and music. The same corridors that once enforced silence, now celebrating the sounds that make life worth living. Clayton had installed a piano in his office, where 3-year-old Melody practiced scales while he worked, her tiny fingers finding melodies that made even the most serious business meetings pause in appreciation. "Daddy, play our song," she demanded from her perch on the office couch, dark curls bouncing with the authority of someone who'd never known a world without music. Clayton abandoned his conference call to sit at the piano bench beside his daughter. Together, they played the melody that had started it all, Marcus Beauregard's love song, transformed from lament to celebration through the alchemy of time and understanding. Zara appeared in the doorway, beautiful at 35 in ways that had nothing to do with youth and everything to do with the contentment of a woman who'd found her place in the world. She carried their son, 2-year-old Marcus Clayton Wexler, named for the grandfather who'd unknowingly brought his parents together across decades and heartbreak. "The foundation board is here," she announced, settling into Clayton's lap while their children played. The Layla Beauregard Wexler Foundation had grown into one of the most successful family reunion organizations in the country, helping thousands of separated relatives find each other through DNA matching and genealogy research. The board meeting was held in the conference room, where Richard Halverson had once been arrested. Now it hosted monthly gatherings of people whose lives had been changed by the foundation's work. Adopted children finding birth families, siblings separated by foster care, parents and children reunited after decades of searching. "This month we've facilitated 47 reunions," reported Dr. Martinez, the foundation's director, including 3 families separated by Hurricane Katrina, just like your own story. Their story had become legend in genealogy circles, proof that love finds a way across generations, that music carries memory even when words fail. Clayton and Zara spoke at conferences, sharing the journey that had led them from mystery to marriage, from isolation to family. But their greatest success wasn't public recognition or foundation awards. It was the ordinary magic of Sunday mornings when 4 generations gathered in the music room. Clayton's adoptive parents, now in their 80s but still sharp, Viola Beauregard, Zara's grandmother, now 90 and proud of her expanded family, and the children who would carry their story forward. "Tell us about great-grandpa Marcus," Melody demanded during one such gathering, the same way children everywhere asked for familiar stories. "He was a musician," Viola began, her voice still strong despite her age. "Played saxophone on street corners and wrote songs about the people he loved but couldn't find. Like Mama and Daddy?" "Exactly like Mama and Daddy. Sometimes love gets lost, but it always finds its way home eventually." That evening, after the children were asleep and the house settled into peaceful quiet, Clayton and Zara made love with the tender passion of people who'd weathered storms and emerged stronger. Every touch carried the weight of their history. Every kiss a promise that their story would continue through the children sleeping down the hall. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't taken that temp job?" Zara asked, her head on his chest, listening to the heartbeat that had become her favorite music. "We would have found each other some other way," Clayton replied with absolute certainty. "Some connections are too strong for coincidence to ignore." As they drifted toward sleep, surrounded by the photographs and mementos of the family they'd built, the ghost of an old saxophone melody seemed to drift through the house. Not sad anymore, but celebratory. Marcus Beauregard's song had finally found its perfect ending in the laughter of grandchildren who would never doubt they were loved, wanted, and exactly where they belonged. The next morning brought the usual chaos of a house full of children and possibilities. Melody practiced piano while Marcus banged on toy drums, creating the kind of beautiful noise that Clayton had spent 20 years trying to avoid and now couldn't imagine living without. "Daddy," Melody announced with the seriousness of someone making an important discovery, "I think Great-Grandpa's song is Happy Now." Clayton scooped her up, spinning her around the kitchen where her great-aunt Layla had planned their future with such careful hope. "Why do you say that, sweetheart?" "Because it found us. And we found each other. And now nobody has to be lost anymore." Out of the mouths of babes came wisdom that took adults decades to understand. Love doesn't end with death. It multiplies, transforms, finds new voices to carry old songs into tomorrow. The foundation continued to grow, helping other families bridge the gaps that time and circumstance had created. But at home, in the house that love built, for people who'd started as strangers had become the family that Layla dreamed of, Marcus wished for, and destiny had finally delivered. So what would you do if a single song changed your entire life? If coincidence felt like destiny? Comment below with the moment you knew everything was going to be different. Because sometimes the music plays on long after the dancing stops. It just waits for new dancers to pick up the rhythm and carry it home. If this story of music, mystery, and impossible love touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that prove love doesn't end with death. It just finds new ways to sing. Tell me in the comments what song connects you to someone you've lost. Because the most beautiful melodies aren't the ones that end. They're the ones that echo through generations, getting richer and more complex with every voice that learns to sing along.